Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed, December Q&A, part 1. I guess I'll start by saying Merry Christmas, probably Happy New Year, because let's be honest, we have no idea when Balin's actually getting around to editing this and getting on the main channel. It could be January. So
yeah, I think we're making him work Christmas Day, so just to make sure this is all getting out. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully everyone has a good Christmas, gets the presents and things they asked for. Maybe Santa Claus will break into an open AI warehouse, steal a heap of DDR5 memory and share that around. We can only hope. Not that we're advocating for Santa Claus breaking the law or anything.
No, I am. I'm advocating for that, actually. Yeah. But you never know. Maybe Santa's an OpenAI investor, and he's actually helping to build, the data centers.
Yeah, could be part of the problem. On that note, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and the new Duranaut High Performance Thermal Paste. Duranaut offers extreme long-term stability combined with outstanding thermal conductivity, and this has been achieved through a specially engineered silicon oil combined with aluminium microparticles and zinc oxide nanoparticles of various shapes. Duranaut isn't electrically conductive and won't harden over time. For best performance, you'll want to apply a very thin layer, and to help with this, included is the TG Spatula Pro. The spatula's revised design allows for increased pressure during application, making it easy to spread a thin, even layer of Duranaut. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Alright, Tim, we have a question here from Nick on our Discord. I've been informed by the comments here. And Nick asks, do you think AMD will retain the same DDR5 6000 sweet spot, especially now given the skyrocketing price of DRAM? So, AMD, I guess, claimed for the AM5 platform that DDR5 6000 was the sweet spot, that they kind of changed that to 8000 to justify the introduction, or to justify rebranding the 600 series chipsets to 8. That's a different thing. So, but basically, what determines a sweet spot for memory is price to performance. So what memory offers you sort of the best performance at the best price point, best value type memory. And that has been DDR5 6000 for AM5. Now, is that changing with all these messed up DRAM prices? I had a quick look before we started recording, and it doesn't seem to really matter too much. I know that the 4800, the 5200, the 5600 memory is cheaper, which has always been the case. But it seems to be, at least based on what I was able to find before recording this, sort of the same ratios it's always been. So on Newegg, for example, the cheapest DDR5 memory is ATEC. You can get their DDR5 5600 CL40 memory, which is the same price as the 4800 memory, so you might as well just get the 5600 stuff. That's only an 8GB module, and it's $100 US or $98 US exactly. So a 16GB kit is going to cost you $200 US, which is awful. There's another memory maker called King Bank. Not familiar with them, but they have a DDR5 6000 CL36 kit, so that sounds decent. 32GB, that's $300 US. So it's $100 US more, but you're getting twice the capacity with much better performance, I would say. 6000 CL36 versus 5600 CL40. Don't know all the secondary and tertiary timings, but presumably it's better quality memory. So really, based on that, I'd say the 6000 kit's still a sweet spot, because when you go to a 5600 32GB kit, it's like $270 US. So it's a $30 US difference, which, like I said, I think that was basically what it always was.
Yep.
And then where we're a market we're very familiar with here in Australia, so looking at like a large online retailer such as PC Case Gear, their Team T-Force Delta RGB 16GB 5600 CL40 kit is $330, whereas a Kingston Fury Beast 6000 CL36 kit is $350. So again, it's like a $20 Australian difference, which is next to nothing. These are only 16GB memory kits, so $350 for 16GB of DDR5, obviously not good, but DRAM apocalypse and all that. So based on that little bit of research I was able to do, it seems like DDR5 6000 is still probably the sweet spot, but really at this point in time, you would be getting whatever memory you can get your hands on, because a lot of it is out of stock, or some of it's extremely overpriced, like the lower latency DDR5 6000, because that's in high demand. But if you get the slightly higher latency stuff like the CL36, it's pretty similar to the base model stuff. Realistically, If you don't need to buy DDR5 memory, or you can in any way hold out, do that. Having said that, I don't know if pricing is going to get worse and availability is going to get worse, and how long that is going to take place for. We do have a crystal ball somewhere, but we won't get it out just yet. But what I'm saying is, even with the crystal ball, I don't know how long this is going to last. All right, Manya, also from the Hardware Unboxed Discord, who always has serious questions, and this is a perfect example of the type of question that Manya would ask. Have you considered selling up all the DDR5 in the lab and retiring? No. I have considered retiring, though, the way things have been going the last few years, and looking at the year ahead. I'm like, do I just want to retire, maybe build some desks, build some gaming setups, do that for my years? I don't know. But no, I haven't considered doing that because we use it for testing and other things. And I did have a DDR5 6000 CL30 kit, I think, the other day, have a problem.
We're not good in this climate.
Yeah, I have a couple more kits, so we're still good to go.
That's like $4,000 worth of memory.
It's more than I'd like to pay to replace. So I'm not even sure how I'll go getting that replaced with shortages of that memory.
Yeah, what happens if you have an RMA? Do you send it back and they're just like, too bad, we don't have any, so you're just going to have to wait 6 months to get it restocked?
Historically, I think there have been examples where people have either been given like a similar product, which I don't really know how you do that, or they've just been told they have to wait.
Yep, not great.
So that's not great. But how much DDR5 memory do you actually have?
Me? Well, these days, I don't know, probably tens of thousands of dollars worth, but not that much.
Yeah, okay.
I've got enough for like test systems and stuff and some spares. So, if things start to break, I think I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
At least with like my main PC, at one point I had 4 48 gig sticks in there, but I took it back down to just 2 of them to improve the bandwidth a little bit for some of the editing stuff I was doing. So at least for like my main editing PC, I've got the exact memory sticks, 2 of them just sitting around. So if that dies for whatever reason, got some backups, which is nice. But
we've got 256 gigabytes of that RDIMM memory in our Threadripper PC. So maybe I'll sell that and make Balin use a laptop or something.
Oh, we tried doing that at CES and it didn't go that well. So
no, it's not really a problem for me. I'd have all the money and then he'd have to edit the video on a slow laptop.
Yeah.
And I think even paying him additional hours would still end up in my favor.
Yeah, could do.
I'll look into that. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. All right, Tim, we have what looks to be, you're not going to believe this. You actually couldn't guess, so I'm not going to let you guess. Another RAM-related question.
Oh, yeah.
So given that this is yet another one, I'm going to throw this one over to you.
Sure.
So with RAM prices being absolutely ludicrous right now, how much of an impact do you guys think, Tim, this will have on new consumer CPU sales? So what's this doing to the CPU sales for, I guess, well, by new, I guess you just mean the current stuff because we haven't got any new stuff yet. But we'll give us 2 examples, Tim. What's doing for the current stuff and then any future CPU releases in the next little bit.
Well, I think obviously the main issue is going to be anyone who needs to buy memory along with their CPU. So platform upgrades is sort of the big one I'd be thinking about. If you're moving from, say, AM4 to AM5, you have to buy DDR5 memory. That's going to be pretty problematic. So I'd imagine most people considering that would now be probably changing their opinion on that, maybe not considering it anymore. So that's a big market that will go out the window. Same with sort of your new PC builds. Those are going to get more expensive. And so there's going to be less people interested in buying whole new systems, which is a big portion of CPU sales as well. I wouldn't imagine it have too much of an issue for people already on a certain platform. So if you're already on AM4 and you're looking at doing the usual 5800 X3D upgrade, which I know you can't really buy new anymore, you sort of have to go to other markets, but people would still be interested in doing that. Same on AM5. If you'd bought into, say, a 7600 or 7500F and later you wanted to buy like a 9800 X3D, you don't really need new memory for that. So that path is going to be okay. And as you mentioned with like future CPU upgrades, I think a lot of the interest will be for, Zen 6 processors on the AM5 platform. For upgraders, again, probably not too much of an issue there. But then anyone doing platform upgrades is going to be a problem. And that may impact something like Intel's new CPU platform.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, where that is going to be debuting on a new motherboard. And you might see people, depending on how the performance goes, switching from like AM5 with DDR5 to the new Intel platform with DDR5 and just porting over the memory. I don't think that will be super likely, though. I would imagine most people who would have interest in like a new Intel platform would be new PC builders, people upgrading from older platforms or some combination.
Yeah, possibly like 12th, 13th, 14th gen owners.
That's a possibility.
So, and they would probably have DDR5, though not guaranteed. But as you say, this really does probably stand to hurt Intel a lot more than AMD. It'll hurt sales for both of them. But with Zen 6, there'll be a lot of people with maybe 7500Fs, 7600s that are perhaps looking at getting a big performance upgrade, if that's on offer, of course. That's all speculation, but at least they've got that. It's an advantage of platform longevity is that you don't need to buy a new memory and motherboard.
Yeah. And Intel makes a lot of their CPU sales from OEM systems.
Mm-hmm.
So while the DIY market is pretty dead on the Intel side of things, I think the latest sales figures are sort of showing like maybe 15% of sales go to Intel in the DIY market. They're still doing okay in your sort of OEM builds. But if the whole price of a PC goes up, then it's going to hurt that market. Not as many people are going to be interested in buying OEM systems. I guess there'll still be people who need a PC for whatever reason, like their old one dies or that they have to buy a new one and they just have to deal with higher prices or reduce memory capacity. But yeah, for a lot of people that were sort of waiting for like a good sweet spot sort of upgrade, it's going to hurt for that. And it's going to hurt a lot of other components as well. Any of the other components that you'd be thinking of that go into those sorts of platform upgrades or new PC builds, where you're not as likely to just do a single component upgrade. So I'm thinking of things like, cases and coolers. Mm-hmm. Like there's not going to be too many people buying a case and just upgrading a case. It's not really something that happens too often, at least.
Maybe it'll happen more during this because people will be like, well, I do want to build a new computer soon. I will need a new case. Maybe I'll do that now, so I've got something to do. And
buy a new monitor, get that monitor upgrade going. I reckon that's the way to go. But yeah, like any of those components will be affected. Maybe GPUs not so much. It depends on how much more expensive GPUs are going to get, but a lot of GPU sales are upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be one of the lesser impacted components, but it's hard to say. Like DRAM is in so many things and impacts so many products that I could see it having pretty widespread consequences. But yeah, hopefully we see things stabilize to a certain level, not as much uncertainty, and then we can sort of figure all those things out and see what makes sense for people to do. And you'll see that on the channel. We'll be talking about, does it make sense to buy certain components, do certain upgrades based on the current prices of DRAM. So it'll be something to watch for 2026. Interesting times ahead. Can you reflect on the actual game performance loss of low-end RAM, e.g. 5200 CL40 versus sweet spot 6000 CL30? In price to performance with current RAM pricing? It's a hot topic sort of question at the moment.
Yep. So I have actually made a video dedicated to just this subject. I think it's called something like XMP/Expo versus official memory something. I don't remember what I called it. So
yeah, we make a lot of videos, so it's somewhere in the channel.
Maybe there'll be some B-roll in this section that'll show that video, so you can go search for it if you're really interested. But basically, I did make some notes here. So given that you're asking about 5200 to 6000, I'm going to work under the assumption that you're talking about AM5 processors here, though the video does have 12th gen, 14th gen, and 7000 series from AMD. But for a 7700X, so the non-3D V-cache enabled CPUs, which tend to be a bit more memory sensitive because they have less L3 cache, you're looking at a 12% performance improvement from 5200 CL40 to 6000 CL30. And that's obviously when pretty heavily CPU limited, so not a massive difference there. And then with a 7800X 3D, it's like 4% faster. And that was with a 4090 at 1080p. So again, this is CPU limited. For a lot of games, the difference in memory performance is going to make next to no difference. The memory stuff applies more for playing like your Call of Duty Warzone type games with competitive quality settings, Fortnite, Valorant, Counter-Strike, those sort of games, or maybe city builders and turn-based games and things like that use a lot of CPU performance. But any games that end up being more GPU limited, you're not going to see much difference. But I also noted in this example for the testing in that video, Hogwarts Legacy and Homeworld 3, they did see quite a substantial performance improvement outside of the average at frame rates that you would notice the difference. So again, Hogwarts Legacy, very CPU demanding game, so the faster memory will make a difference there. So there's no real like rule of thumb for this, apart from to say that if it's a CPU demanding game, you are and you're likely to be CPU limited, then you will see a difference. But
yeah, I mean, previously we've sort of recommended the sweet spot memory because the price difference has been negligible.
That's right.
So even if you were more likely to be GPU limited, you may as well pay the very small difference, $10, $20 to get the better sweet spot memory, just to ensure that if you do play like a Hogwarts Legacy, that you're all good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I know we talked earlier a little bit about the pricing difference isn't too bad between like the 5,200 to 6,000 sort of stuff. But who knows? Maybe in 6 months from now, the really premium memory is suddenly stupidly expensive, but then the 5,200 stuff is badly priced, but not crazily priced.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, then, yeah, it's not going to be a devastating performance loss if you do have to buy that cheaper, lower speed memory, which I think is sort of a better position to be in. There's obviously the chance with GPUs, for example, if those go up in price a fair bit, you could see quite a substantial performance loss. But something like a 10% difference, if you sort of, you really need to buy a PC or do an upgrade or something, and you're like, I'm sort of nervous about buying that cheaper entry-level memory, but then it's only that sort of level of performance loss, depending on the games you're playing. It's not going to be the end of the world, I wouldn't have said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our 13th and 14th gen Intel CPUs making a comeback, especially they support DDR4, which is cheaper. I honestly don't know if they're making a comeback or not. Recently I did sort of an AM4 revisit because not so much of a comeback. I more noted that a part like the Ryzen 5 5500 is already selling in huge volumes and has been for a while. And pretty much any AM4 CPUs that are still available tend to sell quite well because there is a lot of people with, first, second, sort of third generation AM4 Ryzen processors. So there is a big upgrade path there, which makes sense that if the latest generation or the last generation on that platform, they sell well. 5800X3D, 5700X3D, they all sold out and are long gone now as far as I'm aware. But with the 13th and 14th gen stuff, I'm not sure. There hasn't been a huge demand for those CPUs ever since they had the degradation issues and all those concerns, and that kind of sullied the platform and caused people to move on. And then, DDR4 motherboards, you can still get them, but they're few and far between from that platform as well. And then DDR4, it's not, at least in most of the places I've checked, miles cheaper than DDR5. Like, it's generally just worth. For example, by the time you tally up the price of, say you're going mid-range, like a 14600, well, is that mid-range 14600K or is
probably
that 114?
Today's standards, I don't know.
Well, it's about a $200 US processor, so you're comparing that to like a 9600X, a 14600K with DDR4 memory, especially the cheaper stuff that's available now. Performance not going to be great compared to DDR5. I'd say DDR5 on average, you're looking at probably 20% better performance. So that makes the 9600X quite a bit faster for gaming. And then you've got the whole upgradable platform and stuff. So I'm not sure it's going to make sense. And I'm not even really sure it makes sense for AM4 either.
No, I mean, I could see the angle of this question being like, I've got DDR4 memory already. So does it make sense to, get an Intel 13th or 14th gen CPU as sort of an upgrade? Of course, you have to buy a different motherboard and all that. And that's like a maybe, I guess.
Yeah, that could make sense.
But I would think if you're sort of coming into this being like, I'm needing to build a new PC, and so I need to buy some sort of memory. Can I save a bit of money buying DDR4 instead of DDR5? And then with the DDR4 options, you've got AM4 or Intel platforms. Does it make sense? Are people flocking to those Intel platforms? I don't really think so. Especially because, what's the performance difference between like a 5800X3D on AM4 with DDR4 memory to one of those Intel CPUs, like a flagship one with DDR4 memory? It's probably not that different, is it? So you wouldn't have seen people, flocking to the Intel option because that now suddenly makes a lot more sense. And certainly when we look at like CPU sales and CPU volumes, it doesn't seem like they're that popular, at least not significantly more popular than they were, a couple of years ago when they came out. So I just don't really think that's an angle that's going to work at the moment. But again, you never know. You never know if DDR5 continues to rise, but DDR4 plateaus a bit, then potentially those DDR4 platforms become a bit more attractive. So you never know. With the increasing thirst of AI for RAM and the shrinking availability of certain hardware components for consumers, could we see a renaissance in game optimization from developers to increase the number of potential customers? Well, I think the most likely answer to this is no. Optimization has been an issue for a while now. As we've seen, there's still quite popular 8GB GPUs in terms of VRAM, and there's been no real effort from developers to sort of make that work. It's sort of more, they're designing a game to work with, let's say, 12 or 16 gigabytes of VRAM. That was the target from the beginning. There's very little that we're seeing where they're going back and making those games now work really well on 8GB cards, just because 8GB cards are still a thing in 2025. They just sort of give you the low settings. That tends to be the way that it works today. So the fact that you can't really buy DRAM, or maybe GPU prices are going to increase, I wouldn't have said that we're going to start seeing like really optimized games. I think if anything, they'll sort of plateau maybe at the level that we've got today. But even then, like, most games are developed for console platforms first, in which case the PS5 is sort of the standard option there, which has 16 gigabytes of unified memory, about 12 to 14 gigabytes available for developers to use. And so that's going to be the standard continuing. And I think as well, like, game developers, they make these games so far in advance that games that are coming out during this DRAM apocalypse are going to have been planned well before that was a thing. So it'll be very difficult to come at the last minute and optimize for it. And then any games that are sort of starting the development process now, I don't know how much you'd want to read into like this is going to be a forever issue, because I'm not sure that it will be. We've seen boom and bust cycles with RAM many times before. And if, the interest in AI cools off in the next couple of years, or data center build-outs get delayed, which seems to be starting to happen with some of these, build-out processes, and all various different things that can impact the demand for this sort of memory, plus the fact that it seems to be a lot of panic buying at the moment. Like, the prices increased so much so quickly that there's a lot of like, oh, I need to buy now before things get crazy sort of thing. Would a game developer that's thinking of designing a game that's going to be released in 3 to 5 years from now be sort of going, well, I'm going to be predicting that there's an issue with DRAM in 2026, therefore in 2029 or 2030 that, it's still going to be a problem, and we're still going to be stuck with, let's say, 16 gigabytes of DDR5 memory plus 8 gigabytes of VRAM. I don't know whether they'd be making those calls necessarily. And plus, as I sort of said, whenever it comes to this whole idea of game developers are going to assess the market and start optimizing games, has never happened. So
I think with the whole game optimization thing, I think in a perfect world, all game developers want their games to be well optimized and work on a range of hardware. I know we get differing theories as to why things play out the way they do with, say, Borderlands 4, for example, and certain company CEOs don't necessarily handle those things very well. But as we've seen with Borderlands 4, they are continuing to work on the game to better optimize it and get it running better on a wider range of hardware. They've recently rolled out an update that really improves performance on 8GB cards. Doesn't entirely solve it, but it certainly improves it quite dramatically. I think it was like a 30-40% performance uplift, and then we're seeing around a 20% uplift on cards that already had enough VRAM, and they're promising, significant, or they're promising performance improvements in the coming months as well with updates. And we've seen a few other games that are still getting updated, and they're still looking to optimize and improve performance. So really, it boils down to a time thing. Like, it's managing getting the game out so they can recover development costs and start making money from it. And arguably, a lot of them do release too early, but there are other factors at play there. But in a perfect world, they would like to give you a fully polished, finished game. It's just that the environment doesn't always allow for that, and that's why we end up with Borderlands 4 problems. And then those problems are compounded by the fact that they're not handled nearly as well as they should be, and they claim that the game's perfectly optimized and there's really not much more they could do, and then months later, hey, it's actually a lot better now. And that's what people were asking for from the start. So it's kind of complicated. Not defending or making excuses for anyone. It's just it's kind of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I think the issue that we see with, say, low memory amounts and how that plays out with games, it's not so much that like the games don't work, because a lot of games do run on 8 GB GPUs today. It's how, like, what experience you're getting on the 8 GB card.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the case of like Borderlands 4, you've always been able to play that game on an 8 GB card. You just have to play on like low settings or turn things all the way down, especially the things that impact memory, like your texture quality settings, environment settings, those sort of things. And so, yeah, game developers have never sort of just thrown those customers in the trash, because they know that a lot of people buying these games are going to be running the games on that hardware. But the problem has been sort of this acceptance that we're going to get the sale from the customer that has an 8 GB card, but we're not going to really do much for that person. We're just going to ensure that it runs, and that's sort of the bare minimum. I'd be thinking with this sort of question, it's very much more like, are we going to be getting improved experiences for people that have an 8 GB GPU or low system memory? And I think you've brought up some really good reasons as to why that probably won't be happening, or at least is going to take time to happen. Because as you sort of said, there has been games where we see the lower texture quality settings improve over time, where they sort of do a bit more optimization in there. Because the obvious way that game developers save, money, to save resources to not do as much optimization work, is they don't really go through and do nice little, let's make the high quality texture pack and then like a slightly lower version and a slightly lower version. They give you the really good quality version if you have enough VRAM, and then the muddy, awful, like, let's hit a button in Unreal Engine to delete the textures, and that's what you get. Or you've seen from games like Hogwarts Legacy, where they just drop textures entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get a game like Star Wars Outlaws, where you don't get textures loading in from as far on lower VRAM amounts. And that's actually probably a better solution than some of those other options.
Mm-hmm.
So they've always done those things, but it takes time to make those systems better. And even still, there's only so much that developers can do to make their vision of the game work within the constraints that they're given to them. So, yeah, with the way that sort of the game development's working with, is it corporate greed? It's probably corporate greed. Games releasing early and unoptimized and those sorts of things. I still imagine that will happen, but hopefully with some of those games, like a Borderlands 4, like a Stalker, where they're sort of like these bigger titles, there's more interest and more sales in them, that they go back and they reinvest some of that money that they've made from the game into making it work for those sort of lower tier customers. Especially because I would have thought, if you're sort of more of a budget buyer, you're probably waiting for sales for games. You're not necessarily spending the full $70 at launch to get the launch experience. I know a lot of PC gamers wait for games to go on sale. So yeah, let's hope that that's the case, but I certainly wouldn't be holding my breath to sort of say every game that is designed for 12 or 16 gigabytes of VRAM is now magically going to work on 8, because developers are paying attention to the DRAM crisis and are going to optimize for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that'll be the case. So we'll see.
And that is going to do it for part 1 of the December Q&A series. A lot of DRAM related questions, probably unsurprisingly, really.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
People are mad about that, and so are we.
Yeah.
Yeah,
not much we can do about it at this point in time, apart from just wait and hope. But anyway, that's part 1. There'll be a part 2 and a part 3. They'll be on the channel shortly, so keep an eye out for those. And yeah, we also have the join button on Patreon if you want to become. That's the word, isn't it?
I think that's right. Yeah.
If you want to become a Halo Unboxed member, what does that even give you these days? You get access to our Discord server. That's a cool place to hang out and chat, isn't it?
I agree.
Q&A stuff, we're already sort of doing that right now, so you could do the Q&A stuff later. Live streams.
Yes.
We get together and do a live stream, and behind the scenes content. So some cool stuff there. Anyway, haven't done the best job of pitching that this time. Maybe I should let you do it for part 2.
I'll give it a go. Yeah.
I'm already on holiday break, so I've sort of half checked out.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.